Good day everyone. Previously, we discussed about part 1 of this topic and pinag-usapan natin last time yung mahahalagang concept na related sa culture like values, customs, language, and we also elaborated last time yung iba't ibang cultural groups rather na nakakaapekto sa international business. And today, we will continue the conversation regarding culture and foreign industry, international business practices like what we're claiming, culture plays a critical role. As a result, we will learn about the various approaches or dimensions that will aid us in comprehending the cultural complexities that exist in various countries. Since we will be aware of the evolving cultural diversity, we will be able to conduct successful foreign business operations. But of course, before we proceed to our main agenda, let me give you the contents of this video presentation. For today's video, we will focus on the following topics: the introduction, key methods used to describe culture, how culture impacts local business practices, the global business ethics, and impacts of ethics on global business. These subjects would undoubtedly aid us in gaining a better understanding of our society and how to do multinational business in light of cultural disparities. To begin, we all know that being aware of various culture is one of the most important concerns that any company should be aware of. And with that, itong mga businesses na nag-ooperate sa iba't ibang parte ng mundo ay kinakailangang maging knowledgeable sa kung anong culture ang nag-exist sa bansa na kung saan sila nag-ooperate. Nowadays, doing business in global market is not only for large corporations, because even small and medium enterprises can do international business. It only means na ang necessity when it comes to understanding culture across various countries is extremely important. Alam naman kasi natin na ang mga business na hindi nakakasabay sa malawak na kompetisyon sa global market ay yung mga businesses na hindi nagbibigay ng panahon to understand the culture of different nations. Speaking of understanding the culture, paano nga ba natin maiintindihan itong mga culture na to? Is there some way for us to gain a strategic understanding of them? The answer is yes. Of course, several research studies have investigated this problem at ilan sa mga kakilala na nagbigay ng contribution sa ganitong mga usapin ay sina Gert Hofstede and Edward T. Hall. Let's look at the results of their researches. Unahin natin yung study ni Hofstede, but before that, let me introduce muna sa inyo ang maikling pagkakakilanlan ni Gert Hofstede. Hofstede is a well-known Dutch cultural researcher who believes that culture is the social conditioning of the mind that distinguishes members from one community or category of people from those of another. With this definition of culture, people can be able to become part of one society despite na may pagkakaiba sa kultura nila as long as the people are willing to adapt the culture of the others, or ikinondisyon niya yung kanyang mind that he is belong to this kind of culture. This is the reason why American people, for example, due to their willingness to adopt Filipino cultures, natututunan nila yung kultura na nag-i-exist sa Pilipinas. That's why we concluded that a culture can be learned. To continue, Hofstede conducted a study among different employees of IBM na nakalocate sa iba't ibang bansa, and sa pag-aaral niya ay nakita niya ang pagkakatulad at pagkakaiba-iba ng culture despite that they are belongs to one organization. And through this study, Hofstede formulated the 5 key values dimension that we can be used in determining or comprehending various cultures. The 5 dimensions are the power distance, collectivism versus individualism, femininity versus masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, and long versus short-term orientations. So let us discuss these dimensions one by one. Here are the 5 key value dimensions that Hofstede formulated to assess and describe a national culture's habit, beliefs, and attitude. The first one is the power distance. It refers to how freely a group or community embraces or rejects individual distinctions. People in certain cultures embrace unequally allocated authority to a greater extent than people in other cultures. The bond between bosses and subordinates is one of dependency in high power distance society. The bond between bosses and subordinates in a low power gap society is one of interdependence or connectivity. So in this dimension, gives us an idea na may mga bansa na may mataas na degree ng power distance. It means these countries are believing that authority and power are the reality of life. So kapag nag-market ka ng inyong product or services sa bansang may mataas ng degree ng power distance, you will understand it basically because it is part of their culture. And if you will understand it, you can be able to make a strategic actions pertaining to this concern. Based on some research, Australia is a low power distance country while Asian countries like Hong Kong are high power distance countries. As a result of high power distance, leaders are expected to resolve conflicts as well as make all difficult decisions. Subordinates will simply follow their leader's orders rather than challenge him or her or try to come up with their own conflict resolution strategies. They rarely inspire their leader's authority. On the other hand, there is an option for consultation in lower power distance, and employees will approach and contradict their bosses with convenience. By suggesting their own perspectives, the parties will freely work toward resolving any disagreement. If they are unable to reach an agreement, they may seek the assistance of a mediator. Leaders actually encourage independent thinking and contributions to problem solving. The next one is individualism. It refers to people's tendency to look after themselves and their immediate family and friends, possibly at the expense of society as a whole. Sa isang organization, hindi mawawala ang ganitong klase ng values. Kahit gaano kaganda ang nag-e-exist na organizational culture, meron pa ding sense of individualism sa mga taong kabilang sa isang community. Individualistic societies prioritize the individual's interest above the needs of the community as a whole. So people in this society are seen as self-sufficient and autonomous. Human beliefs and desires have a strong influence on social behavior. According to research, individualistic cultures predominate in North America and Western Europe. So kapag nag-enter kayo ng negosyo somewhere in Western Europe and North America, hindi na kayo magkaka-culture shock dahil aware na kayo sa predominantly nag-e-exist ang individualistic culture sa kanila. The third one is masculinity. This is the cultural context of which countries' dominant goals are accomplishment, assertiveness, and financial prosperity as compared to countries that prioritize partnerships, quality of life, and humility. Masculinity means standing for a social structure in which cultural social norms are distinctly different. Okay, men are expected to be aggressive, harsh, and concentrated on material success. Women are expected to be more respectable, tender, and concerned with quality of life according to Hofstede. So, paano natin malalaman kung ang isang bansa ay may mababa o mataas na masculinity norms? So, according to Hofstede, if the country's social norm are more ego-oriented, wealth, and object are essentials, and people live in order to work, the country has high masculinity. Whereas if the country's social norms are relationship-oriented, quality of life and people are important, and people work in order to live, the country has low masculinity. Uncertainty avoidance is another important value dimension defined by Hofstede. It's the degree to which people feel disturbed by unexpected and extraordinary events that call into question their long-held values and institutions. So countries that value heritage and culture have high level of uncertainty avoidance, while countries that value versatility and informality have a low level of uncertainty avoidance. So countries with high uncertainty avoidance index include Greece, Japan, France, Mexico, Israel, and Germany. The low uncertainty avoidance countries are Singapore, Denmark, Great Britain, and the United States. This report is in accordance to Handbook of Global User Research. So the long-term orientation is the final major value dimension. It denotes whether a community is long-term or short-term oriented. So Hofstede recently introduced this dimension, which has based on the analysis by Michael Band in Hong Kong, who found that Hofstede's previous four cultural dimensions did not accurately represent Asian viewpoints on culture. So according to this dimension, ang isang bansa na may high long-term orientation ay may traits katulad ng they are emphasis on persistence, relationships ordered by status, personal adaptability is important, leisure time not too important, and yung mga bansa naman na may short-term orientation is emphasis on quick results, status that a major issue in relationships, personal steadfastness, and stability important, but the leisure time is important. Moving forward, let's have a look at Edward T. Hall's perspectives, a renowned anthropologist who applied his field to the study of community and intercultural contact. The first principal category defined by Hall is the context that is divided into two, the high context and the low context culture. The distinction between high and low context societies is intended to draw attention to the discrepancies between verbal and non-verbal communication. So high context societies can be communicate in a way that emphasizes the message underlying context, meaning sound rather than just the words themselves. So Japan, China, France, Spain, Brazil, and other countries fell under this category. Pag sinabi naman nating low context communities, it requires messages to be clearly communicated to avoid misunderstanding. Because if the statement isn't plain enough, it will all slow down the negotiation process. So leaving any wiggle space for interpretation can be dangerous in some serious situations. Western societies such as the United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States are examples of low context contact. So if you have your own business at binabalak mong mag-internationalize ng operations, you should consider the degree of the country's culture context. In that way, mas mabilis para sa operations ng business na ma-communicate ang ginagawang negosyo sa kanilang bansa. Another principal category defined by Hall is the space. The analysis of physical space and humans is referred to as space, and the analysis of proxemics, as Hall called it, focuses on the space and the distance between individuals as they communicate. And on the office and other environments, space applies to anything from how close people stand to one another to how people mark their territories or borders. Based on the picture, makikita ang interpretation na kung gaano kalayo ang distance ng dalawang taong nagko-communicate sa isa't isa. So if two people are 0 to 50 centimeter apart, it means the relationship is intimate. Personal means 0.5 to 1 meter, and social is 1 to 4 meters, and public naman kapag 4 meters or more ang distance ng nagko-communicate. In the Philippines, mayroon tayong nakaugalian or naging parte na ng ating nakasanayang biro na kapag ang dalawang taong hindi naman magkakilala ay sobrang dikit sa isa't isa, sinasabihan natin silang close sila sa isa't isa. It means intimate ang kanilang relationship. These illustrative examples will definitely help us to understand the countries with this kind of culture. The last category defined by Hall is the polychronic or monochronic culture. Monochronic societies like to focus on just one task at a time. They put a priority on orderliness and the feeling that something has its proper time and place. Interruptions are not valued by them. Kapag naman sinabi nating polychronic societies, they are like doing many tasks at once. Okay, in a polychronic world, a manager's office usually has an open entrance, a ringing phone, and a meeting going on the same time. Fons Trompenaars is another scholar who has made a significant contribution to the field of culture. His research went further in the topic, focusing on the management consequences of cultural differences. He looked at the cultural extremes and misunderstanding that can happen when doing business with people from other backgrounds, even though they work for the same organization. He concluded at 7 unique cultural scales and used the answered questionnaires in his research to chart a broad range of countries into a scale within each category, from one extreme to the other. To understand this mapping strategy, you must first identify or determine where each nation or society stands in relation to others on one or more of these dimensions. So, isa-isahin natin ang mga dimensions na naging resulta ng pag-aaral ni Fons. Ang una is yung universalism versus particularism. Laws and legislations are enforced in universalistic societies in all contexts, regardless of all the conditions or circumstances. Para mas maintindihan natin ang nature nitong universalistic society, sometimes we as an individual hard to comply with a certain requirement, might it be on school or job due to some undesired events in our life like sickness. The question is, dahil ba hindi natin na-comply ang requirements dahil nagkasakit tayo, should we penalize or entitled for a consequence, or should we be excused because of the particular circumstances? Remember that in universalism, laws, statutes, principles, and responsibilities are highly valued by people. So they strive to treat individuals equally based on these laws, but rules take precedence over relationships. So, sa ating given examples, if the certain organization is practicing equal treatment of the law at nakalagay sa kanilang policy na hindi excuse ang ating reason, we will be penalized. On the other hand, in particularism, people assume that the laws they abide by are dictated by their circumstances and relationships. So their reaction to the situation can shift depending on what's going on at the time and who's involved. The United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Netherlands, Germany, New Zealand, Australia, and Switzerland are the examples of universalistic societies. Russia, Latin America, and China are some of the examples of particularistic societies. Next one is the individualism and collectivism. So this dimension focuses on whether human rights and ideals are superior or inferior to those of a larger community, and it directly builds on Hofstede's work. Pinag-usapan nga natin na isa din sa mga naging findings na study ni Hofstede na may mga country na may mataas na individualistic culture. It means kapag nagdo-dominate sa kanila yung individual goals nila rather than the goals of the organization, some of the identified countries with individualistic cultures are Canada, US, Switzerland, and UK. On the other hand, Japan, Egypt, India, Nepal, and Kuwait are among the most collectivist countries. The third one is the neutral versus emotional. This represents the level of emotional expressions in the workplace. More specifically, it shows whether emotional or subjective forms of judgment are considered to be the foundation for successful organizational decision-making. Kapag ang isang bansa ay neutral, people make a concerted attempt to keep their feelings under balance. So their decisions are influenced much more by reason rather than by their emotions. So people cannot express what they are thinking or doing. On the other hand, sa mga bansa naman na emotional, yung mga tao dito ay nag-iisip that everyone should be able to share their feelings at work, even though it is just inadvertently expression of feeling is welcomed and embraced in these countries or in this kind of culture. So typical neutral cultures include the United Kingdom, Sweden, and Netherlands, Finland, and Germany. And typical emotional culture includes Italy, France, Spain, and countries in Latin America. Okay, the next one is specific versus diffuse. Okay, people keep their personal and professional life apart. As a consequence, they conclude that interpersonal relationships have little effect on job goals, and that while strong interpersonal relationships are necessary, people can work together without having a good relationship. So these are the characteristics of a specific culture, while in diffuse culture, people see a link between their professional and personal lives. So they agree that healthy partnerships are essential for achieving business goals and that their relationships with others will be the same whether they are working or socializing. So people share with friends and clients outside the business hours. So typically specific cultures include the US and the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands. And the typical diffuse culture naman ay makikita sa Argentina, Spain, Russia, India, and China. Okay. The next one is the achievement versus ascription. So these factors refers to one position within the institution. So comparing culture with which rank, credibility, legitimacy, eventually control are founded on talent versus cultures in which class, gender, education, or age are the distinguishing characteristics. So ma-observe natin ang achievement culture ay sa isang bansa if their people value performance no matter who you are. So they are after the achievement. Kabaligtaran naman ito ng mga country na may ascription culture na kung saan yung mga tao ng isang society ay naniniwala that everyone should be valued for who you are. So yung United States, Canada, Australia, and Scandinavia are examples of typical achievement societies. Yung France, Italy, Japan, and Saudi Arabia naman ang examples ng ascription societies. Okay, ano pa yung kasunod? So we still have attitude toward time. Okay, according to Trompenaars, it came to the conclusion that people in a given culture are divided into two groups. So those who are concentrate on sequential time and those who focus on synchronous time. So people like it happen in a certain way. So punctuality, preparation, and being on budget are all important to them. Time is money in this kind of society. And people don't like it when their plans are disrupted. Okay? So ito yung mga characteristics ng isang bansa na may mataas na value ng sequential time. Pero sa case naman ng mga bansa na more on synchronous time, people consider the past, current, and future to be connected. They also work on several projects at the same time and consider schedules and obligations to be versatile. So Germany, United Kingdom, and the United States are example of sequential time. Okay, si Japan, Argentina, and Mexico naman ang examples ng mga bansa na may asynchronous time. The last one is the attitude toward environment. So this dimension represent a culture focused on people's relationships with nature and the natural world. So clearly, variations in these dimensions are influenced by theological and philosophical differences across the globe. People in certain countries think they can manipulate nature on their world to accomplish their objectives. Okay, this covers how they collaborate with others and how they function inside the organizations. So any nation, on the other hand, where people feel that nature or the climate governs them, must cooperate with their environment to accomplish their goals. So they are concentrated their decisions on those at work or in relationships, and they avoid confrontation whether possible. People frequently need reassurance that they are doing well. Okay, ilan sa mga bansa na naniniwala na they can manipulate nature to accomplish their objectives are Israel, US, Australia, New Zealand, and United Kingdom. On the other hand, China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia are the examples of country where people feel that nature governs them. So these are the 7 dimensions of culture according to the study conducted by Fons. Moving forward, the following are the impacts of culture on local business practices. So nakita natin ang iba't ibang mga dimensions ng culture na produkto ng masusing pag-aaral ng mga kilalang anthropologists. Now, let us discover how this culture affects the business practices, which is really important to understand, most especially yung mga na nag-a-attempt na mag-expand ng kanilang operation sa global market. In terms of pace of business, we all know naman na isa ang culture sa dapat i-consider dahil may malaking aspeto ito or may malaking epekto ito sa kung gaano kabilis o kabagal ang pag-usad ng negosyo. One of the big reasons that a company's progress toward success and sustainability is because of its culture. So for instance, kapag ang isang country ay mayroong individualistic culture, mahihirapan ang organization na ma-achieve ang organizational goals. That's why it is very important to understand different dimensions of culture na meron ng isang bansa before entering their market. Business protocols can be changed and affected by culture as well. When we attempt to do business across borders, we need to revisit our business protocols. There is a high possibility na may i-revise tayo na sa ating existing business protocols na meron na ang isang negosyo dahil nag-e-exist na yung culture sa ibang bansa, lalo na sa mga protocols or processes na magko-conflict sa culture ng bansa kung saan tayo mag-e-expand ng ating operations. So another is decision making and negotiating. Culture definitely impacts the way business make decisions and negotiations. There are countries, for instance, na alam nating magko-contradict sa culture na meron tayo. So since we are aiming for business expansion sa market ng ibang bansa, we need to consider their culture. For example, a neutral business organization can be experience some changes kapag ang market nila or nag-market sila sa bansa na mayroong emotional culture. So managing employees and projects can be affected by culture. Countries from different part of the world have a well-diverse culture. Business management and practices may not be the same if nag-expand na ang business in international market. Of course, aside from lalawak ang operations, culture may vary time to time. We could expect changes in the leadership since magkakaroon ng adjustment based sa nag-e-exist na culture ng ibang bansa. Propensity of risk-taking is the another area na naapektuhan ng culture. If a certain business organization conservative or moderate in taking the risk, culture might teach them to become aggressive, most especially in the culture and environment of the country where they can market goods and services that highly requires taking risks. The last one is in terms of marketing, sales, and distribution. Hindi madali para sa isang local business na mag-expand ng kanilang market considering the reality that culture really impacts a lot of things in business operations. Katulad na lang ng marketing, sales, and distribution. Like in some cases, other countries' product ads or a TV commercial don't or didn't push through or hindi nabigyan ng pagkakataon na ma-air sa Philippine TV dahil hindi pumasa sa TV Commercial Regulatory Commission of the Philippines dahil hindi nito nasusunod yung culture na nag-e-exist sa ating bansa. It only means that culture is one of many factors na kinakailangan nating pagtuunan ng pansin lalo na sa international business and trade. Apart from that, sabi nga natin, culture is only one of many factors na dapat i-consider, and this time let us talk about global business ethics. we are about dwelling ourselves so much in the discussion of what ethics is. Mas pumunta tayo sa discussion ng ano ba ang business ethics na kinakailangan nating i-possess when we are doing international business and trading. Based on an individual's social or economic status, education, and interactions with other culture and values, judgment can differ tremendously. It should be remembered, as in the case of bribery, that there is a distinction between ethical conduct and common practice. Discrimination can be permissible in certain societies, even though the people in that community are aware that it is not right or rational. People in global corporate ethics want to figure out what constitutes legal behavior and what constitutes standard protocol. At the first glance, spotting immoral actions can seem to be relatively easy. So, madali lang para sa ating makita ano ba yung mga immoral actions. When it comes to corporate ethics naman, most people instinctively think about fraud and corruption, while this is an important consequence of unethical behavior. The philosophy of business ethics, including global business ethics, is much more expansive. Human capital, social responsibilities, and the environment are all affected. So the following fields of industry are influenced by global expectations of legal, moral, and socially responsible behavior. Unahin natin ang ethics and management. Human resources, communications, research and development, and even the business mission are all impacted by ethics of management and operations. For example, ang kultura na nag-i-exist dito sa Pilipinas as far as human resources is concerned is totally different sa culture ng ibang bansa. So it means culture to culture ang nature niya. Giving consideration to this matter, a business ethic should be practiced. There are countries that there are no clear social rules preventing discrimination against people based on age, race, gender, sexual preference, handicap, and so on. But still, as ethical business organizations rather, susunod ka rin ba sa ganong klase ng sistema? The point is, not all existing culture is ethical, and as an ethical business organization, ano ang dapat nating sundin? The culture or the business ethics? Sige nga, can you please comment down your point of view regarding this matter? The next one is ethics and corruption. Let's start with the definition of corruption in the sense of industry. So, giving or gaining benefit by means that are illegal, unethical, and or conflicting with one's obligation of the rights of others is what corruption is described as. Okay, patronage is always the source of corruption. Following traditionally acceptable values is not necessarily the ethical option according to our new view of business ethics. What may have been normal at one point in history, such as bias or discrimination, has become inappropriate as society's mindset has evolved. Ano ang mangyayari kung ang mga strategies ng isang business ay hindi nag-a-adjust based sa nag-i-exist na culture? Is the action immoral, and is the individual who is engaging in it unethical? Any culture may have disagreements with global corporate activities such as gift giving, which has developed into bribery or a type of corruption. Sa Pilipinas, talamak din ang corruption. In private organizations, for example, the suppliers always sending you a gift even hindi ka naman nanghihingi as a sign of having good company-supplier relationship. Pero in some other point of view, it is bribery, which is a form of corruption. So these are the things we should see as far as the ethics and culture is concerned. The last one is the corporate social responsibility or the CSR. It is characterized as a corporate conscience, citizenship, a social success, or sustainable responsible business, and is a type of corporate self-regulation incorporated into a business model. Company tracks and promotes active conformity with a letter of the legislation, ethical principles, and international norms through CSR policy, which is built in and self-regulating. Sa usaping CSR naman, may mga companies din na nagkiklaim that they are practicing corporate social responsibility, but in the reality, walang CSR practices na nag-exist. When we will consider again the ethical principles, hindi siya papasa as ethical practice. However, more organizations are practicing good CSR because this is a way of showing their ethical actions. In the nutshell, I would like to highlight that ethics must be global. Hindi lang dapat ethical ang isang business organization based sa kung ano ang culture na nag-i-exist sa local nation or home country. If they expand business to other countries at na-observe nila na may discrepancy sa ethical actions nila, they should still be ethical at huwag basta-basta susunod sa kung anong culture ang nag-i-exist, lalo na if these cultures violate your corporate ethics. I would like to end this presentation by reiterating that the strength of a nation derives from the integrity of home. It means kung ang isang business organization ay nagpa-practice ng ethical action sa bansa nila, they should still be ethical when they expand to other countries na may nag-e-exist na unethical actions. Again, this is the end of our video presentation. Thank you for being with me until the last minute of this video presentation. May the Lord unkissingly bless you.